Consider taking a staycation. Rediscover the assets that are in your backyard. Pack up the family, get a hotel room, find a spot maybe with a swimming pool. We're putting together itineraries for weekend getaways to really enjoy those assets.
Hey, it's Nate DiSarro, and welcome to Titans of Industry, the podcast where I talk to industry leaders and innovators who are at the top of their game and leading the pack in their fields, uncovering some of the best stories in today's business landscape. In this episode, I sit down with Gretchen Hall, President and CEO of the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Gretchen talks about her goals of growing Arkansas's capital city as a regional destination hub and the steps she's taking towards reintegrating live events and conventions post-pandemic. She also talks about how she is quite possibly the largest advocate for small business in the largest city in Arkansas. From dive restaurants to overlooked nature attractions, Gretchen shares all the hidden gems that Little Rock has to offer. And now let's get to the episode. But before we do, it's important to know that whether you're a small business owner or the face of a multi-billion-dollar industry, your organization has a great story to tell, and Content Titan wants to help you tell it. We are a digital content creation powerhouse built for the 21st century, providing all-in creative, strategic, production, post-production, and distribution services for a 360-degree, 24/7 world. In our world, Titans are passionate, creative doers. They have the experience to take your project from start to finish, minimizing your involvement so you can focus on what matters most, running your business. So if you're ready to take your content strategy and production to the next level, our Titans are ready to help. Now here's my conversation with Gretchen Hall. As someone who makes a living out of running the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Little Rock, Arkansas, talk to me about your path to get there.
Sure. So I say I stumbled into this industry. I got lucky, if you will. But sports was really my path to get here. So I played sports since I was a small child, went to college on an athletic scholarship playing basketball. In the summers, I wanted to travel. I wanted to get out of Arkansas. And so we had worked with a national association that ran youth tournaments in the summer on a national level. And I reached out to that organization, said, do you need some summer help? I want to travel. And they were based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And they hired me. They came to Arkansas, interviewed me, and hired me. And so I worked in Phoenix, and we ran tournaments in Colorado Springs and Dallas, Texas, each summer while I was going to school. So I would go to college at Lyon College in Batesville, and then each summer fly or drive to Phoenix and spend the summer. So I kind of made that triangle and ping-ponged around for 4 years. They hired me right out of college when I graduated and went back to work for them full-time. It turned out that they really needed someone for 6 months in Phoenix running their national tournaments, and then someone for 6 months in Dallas running their winter league. So I did that for a minute and then went to them and said, is there any chance I'm going to be in a home base for 12 months. It's kind of really hard to get an apartment for 6 months at a time, and was ready to be a grown-up and try this adulting thing. So I decided I would go back and get my MBA. And so quit my job, moved back home, started applying for some MBA programs. I didn't get into the two I really wanted. Both of them said I needed more work experience, so I decided, okay, I'll go get more work experience. At that point in time, I'm dating myself a little bit, but you really looked for job openings in the newspaper. So I went to the newspaper and did odd and end things. I was a substitute teacher. I did all kinds of things just to get by for a while, and went to the newspaper, found an opening and a job for an event coordinator at the convention center. And they really applied for that. I got an interview. Lo and behold, in the interview, they really needed somebody that could speak sports and talk to event planners. They were really growing the number of sporting events that were utilized in the convention center. And so that was kind of right up my alley. Said, that's a fit. I've been doing tournament logistics for a while. I think I can do meeting and convention logistics. So I started at the convention center. Here in Little Rock and in Arkansas, the convention center is run by the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So then I learned about the sales and marketing side and the whole tourism industry side of the business while I was working on the operations team. Moved into the marketing role many years later, and then later moved into the CEO role. So kind of stumbled into my career path.
Which I would say by and large is how it happens for most people.
Sure.
The direct trajectory often doesn't happen in a very linear path.
Yep.
So you ended up kind of taking the path all the way through. Talk to me about when you first became in a leadership role. What did convention and visitors bureau in Little Rock look like? What was the tourism industry? What was the state of affairs at that time?
Sure. So I started in 2001. At that point, the now Marriott Hotel was undergoing a massive $40 million renovation to be turned into the Peabody Hotel. The Clinton Presidential Library had been announced and the location chosen and ground broken, but, not open, obviously. And so we were really, as a community, we knew this was a major shot to be placed on the map from a tourism destination. And so all hands on deck working toward how do we maximize being globally recognized when that presidential library opens, and then having a really great headquarter hotel property for our convention center. And so that was kind of the tourism in Little Rock when I first started in 2001.
And here we are, 2020. Things look a little bit different now. You guys have done an amazing job, still continuing to do so, but up until this launch of the new campaign in February. And
perfect timing.
And then less than a month later, tourism as we know it essentially stops. There was no roadmap. So how did you move through these last 3-4 months?
Yeah, so I'm on the executive committee of our International Trade Association and have a lot of friends in the industry across the country and really the world, and they've been a tremendous asset. We are a very sharing community in our tourism industry, much more partners than competitors, and we certainly share best practices, and that has been a tremendous asset. A lot of our vendors have provided free research and data for us to really dive into and better understand what our opportunities are, how we need to address and handle this. And we've got phenomenal trade associations that really help us at the national level getting support, whether that be support from the CARES Act or even down to the local level as well. And so that's been a tremendous asset. But when it first started, there was no roadmap. So I kind of categorized this thing in 3 phases. And the first phase was really triage. And that's kind of the best politically correct answer or comment I can call it. I can describe it in a lot of other ways, but triage, where every day, every hour, every minute was really changing. 2019 was our best year for tourism as far as revenue is concerned, our numbers in the buildings with the events that we hosted, just total tax collections on the advertising and promotion side was phenomenal. Going into 2020, our books, with everything that was booked in the facilities and all of the momentum that we had going into 2020, we fully anticipated breaking the 2019 records and did for the first 2 months, really first two and a half months, until everything came to a screeching halt. And so on March the 12th, we went from having hundreds of events booked in our facilities to having very few. So that overnight affected us. And we knew that would not only cost the organization millions of dollars in revenue, it was also going to be detrimental to our industry. When restrictions of events were put in place, when restrictions for hotels and restaurants and our attractions were all put in place for all the right reasons, we knew it was going to be detrimental to our industry. So we really turned and pivoted not only to protect the long-term life of our organization and had to make very, very hard decisions to do that, but we also got together and said, okay, how can we provide support to our industry? We needed to turn on our advocacy and lobbying efforts to try to get support for all of our individual business owners. We had to provide our industry with resources so that they could make good decisions and make sure that they were informed of all the guidelines and regulations and best practices. And I think by and large, we've done that. And then on a resident level, because we communicate a lot with our residents and they are also our patrons and customers, we really pivoted and tried to provide a lot of at-home inspiration, if you will, and a little bit of levity, because you need some of that so you don't go insane. And so the marketing team kind of created some fun at-home activities that made sure that our residents didn't forget about the assets in our community that they would eventually be able to enjoy again.
I remember the first thing I saw that I felt the impact of this global pandemic was when South by Southwest in Austin, Texas announced they were canceling. And I just remember thinking that conference is part of what defines Austin as a city.
Sure.
And to your point, when you started in your primary roles at the LRCBB, getting ready for this global spotlight on Little Rock when the Presidential Center came here, that helped define part of the city and how people knew it and understood it. What do you think coming out of this is going to help define or redefine
redefine how Little Rock becomes a place where people want to come spend their dollars again.
Yeah, so really promoting a lot of our outdoor assets. All the research shows that that's where people are most comfortable. They're also most comfortable in their car driving right now. So for the short term, to try to inject some back into our economy, we know that visitors are going to be closer to home than they ever have been before. So whether that's a small staycation, whether it's pulling from other areas inside the state of Arkansas, or maybe the areas that are within a short drive time. So we're really targeting in the future about that 5-hour car drive time radius, but we're really promoting a lot of our outdoor activities. Those are the activities that people feel safest, whether that be our river trail, Pinnacle Mountain, our waters, the river itself and all the assets you can do, our sculpture and outdoor art. We've really got a lot of tremendous assets, and we know if we get them here, they're also going to enjoy some of our great restaurants and our culinary scene, our breweries, and some of the other indoor assets as well.
One of the things that also hit me early on is the impact this is having obviously on small businesses left and right, whether it's retail, restaurant, and even just others that are supported by those.
Sure.
And I want to see every door open when it's time to have everybody out, and a lot of things have reopened with limitations and things like that. But I'm sure you have conversations with business owners across the city. What's the general prognosis, the positivity, the negativity? I mean, there's a lot of conversation around all of it, but
it's kind of a mixed bag. Some are more comfortable than others, and some are more precautious than others. I think by and large, the great thing is every single business is trying to do it right. They want to protect their employees. They want to protect their customers. Everyone has a little different philosophy on how to do that, but they are, in all of our conversations, we've really not had any businesses that say, we're just going to open our doors, we're not going to follow the guidelines. They've all been very respectful, and they understand the need to do that. And in Pulaski County, I think our numbers are kind of showing that, and we've really been at a flat level for quite some time, and we want to keep it there and start going down. But by and large, they are doing that. I think we are seeing week over week a few more restaurants opening back up for in-room dining. When that restriction was first lifted, it was maybe 50-50 on who opened up for in-room dining, and the rest of them said, you know what, the capacity doesn't work for us, and we've really kind of honed in on this takeout and delivery, and we're doing well, or I'm just not ready to expose my employees and my guests in that manner, and so we're going to continue with that curbside and delivery. But by and large, the restaurant industry not only has helped each other in a lot of ways, they've pivoted, they've become creative, they're nimble. All these small business owners, they're in survival mode, and they're doing a pretty good job of surviving right now.
I think the thing I miss most is the experiences of being out and being around people. I
Sure.
love events and all that kind of stuff, and I'm desperately wanting that to happen, but obviously for the safety of our public in general, we've got to be cognizant of when that's right. Do you anticipate this year, or, I mean, I know it's hard to say, but what's this stepped approach toward getting people back in
Sure.
physical proximity?
Sure. So it's a long, very slow process is what we're anticipating. I mentioned our restaurants are kind of surviving. They're not thriving, they're surviving. Our hotels have been hit tremendously hard. They are finally starting to see a small uptick, but a small uptick for them is going from 15% occupancy to maybe 18 to 20% occupancy, and they can't survive very long on that. And so we are hopeful that we're going to start seeing some of that leisure travel come back. We have been completely dark in all of our facilities since March 12th, hosting no events until this past weekend. And we hosted our first event, and we were very excited about it. And of course, all guidelines followed, adhered to. It was a small dance recital. It looked very different than previous dance recitals. It took place in the Robinson Performance Hall, which on a typical day seats 2,222 people. We worked with them to kind of break it up and make it into multiple mini recitals. So each recital had 100 people maybe spread out throughout the orchestra seating. We had things roped off to make sure all the social distancing was adhered to. It went off fairly well, considering. Now, it was a little odd, but it was also nice to see that life could come back, even if it was different for a while and much smaller in scale.
To the kid perspective, I have 2 young boys, and for adults, we can keep ourselves occupied at home. We can work from home. We can do the things we need to do. For kids, they just don't have an outlet. And
Yep.
we can send them outside as much as we want, but at some point, they want to be around their friends. They want to do all these things. So it's great to see that things like dance recitals can still take place, because I think even if the crowd's not full, like it maybe would be, you at least give these kids an opportunity to be a part of some sense of normal life again.
Sure, the social interaction is so important. That's why I feel for all the parents parents at home that had to really shift to this digital school environment and not knowing what the fall's going to look like either. I'm sure it's very hard on the kids. We as adults need that social interaction, but so do our children.
Yeah. Well, and we've, in the same vein, done a lot more of small events like this where there's just not many people there, but you're able to still put that on and then do live streaming and push it out to a broader audience that just can't physically be there. But
Sure.
of course, we're creatures, again, that want to be in physical proximity, and we want to all be part of that crowd mentality. When we cheer and celebrate something, we all
Right.
want to do it together. It feels so much better. So yeah, hopefully this will continue to stair step upwards and sooner rather than later. But I think everybody, it's more about getting the vaccine. That's the key, right? That's what we hope is going to be the thing that brings everybody back out and makes us feel the safety and comfort of moving forward with life. But that's the biggest ambiguous answer everybody wants
Right.
to have is, when does it happen? Where does it come from? How long till we have to see it come into society? So until then, we keep adapting and innovating. What else have you seen nationwide that people are doing to continue promoting tourism when tourism is a very difficult thing to comprehend right now?
Sure. So a lot of it really is that inspiration. So whether that be video, photos, social media, it's trying to talk about what we're doing to protect and make our assets safe and make our visitors safe. I think visitors want to know that. They want to know what attractions you have to offer right now that are safe, and then what you have to offer in the future as they dream and think and plan for future travel. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We're trying to do that. We're getting ready to launch a safety pledge so that we can really highlight all of the businesses, not only in the tourism industry, but just citywide, that are doing it right, that are doing above and beyond, that are adhering to all the guidelines, that are really focused on providing a safe environment for their guests and patrons as well as their employees. And so that will launch next week. We've already kind of started that on the meeting planner and meeting and event professional side, where we're pushing notifications to let them know what we're doing and what guidelines and reopening policies and protocols we've established in order to make their event the safest possible, and how we're adjusting the facility layouts and the sanitization practices and all of those things that will give them some comfort, especially in the short term. And all of that's kind of in a digital campaign right now that we're working on.
When it boils down to dollars and cents, there's obviously a timeline, and that timeline only lasts so long. What are ways that, if people wanted to support the efforts, that can happen without going out to eat, going to stay in hotels, going to events? What else can help generate revenue for the CVB, for the city of Little Rock, for this community that people may not know about?
Sure. So the things that we're really promoting is help our small businesses. We want them all to survive. We know the reality is some won't, especially the length that this continues going. But we're asking them, do things like patronize the restaurants, go to, if you're not comfortable doing dine-in service, do the takeout, do the delivery, buy gift certificates, give them as gifts. Some of our museums and attractions and our nonprofit organizations that really provide the base of our quality of life here and our culture from an attractions and entertainment standpoint, we're asking you to consider the virtual tip jars for some of our entertainers, or consider making some donations, or buy the museum or the zoo membership and provide that as a gift in the future when they do reopen. And so we're really trying to encourage people to continue to try to patronize them in that way. As we move into the summer, we're also talking to our residents or those that are really close proximity in Central Arkansas to consider taking a staycation. Rediscover the assets that are in your backyard, and that may mean pack up the family, get a hotel room, find a spot maybe with a swimming pool or in the downtown pedestrian area so that you can really get out and enjoy your hometown or something that's in your backyard. And we're putting together itineraries for weekend getaways to really enjoy those assets.
That's really cool. Shifting gears a little bit, leading through a crisis is something that most leaders have to do. Most of them don't necessarily spend their whole life training for or reading books on, but here we are. So talk to me a little bit about you personally. What has this been like for you? What has the daily routine been like? How has it changed? What have you had to educate yourself on? And what's come naturally?
Sure. So I say a lot of what has built me and developed my leadership skills, really I got from the sports world. I'm a huge fan of sports, but I also attribute a lot of the life lessons that I put into action where I learned on a team sport. And so that's leadership skills, it's communication skills, it's work ethic, it's learning to work with a team and in a team environment, it's dealing with loss and tragedy, it's dealing with triumph and winning. And so I've learned a tremendous amount through team sports from a very young age to a young adult. And I'm able to utilize a lot of those skills in life and in business management. But when all of this began, first and foremost, what goes through my mind is, how do I protect our team? And so we've got a fairly large team at the Convention Bureau. Within our industry, our team is very large. So we have 117 full-time employees. We had 99 part-time employees that work seasonally and through our events. And so the first thought that pops in my head is, okay, how do I protect them? And what do we need to do to protect the team members? And then secondly is, how do I protect the organization? And so we know this is going to be a tremendous economic impact, not only to our bottom line, but our industry as well and community as a whole. And so those were really the two things that guided most of the decisions in the first couple of weeks during that kind of triage phase. We had to make the extremely hard decision to furlough a lot of our team members in order to help save and protect the longevity of the organization. We did everything that we could to take care of those team members. We're continuing to pay for their health care benefits. We helped walk them through that unemployment process. We know they had extra stimulus because of the CARES Act. We touch base with them on a fairly frequent basis in order to try to make sure they're okay and they're safe. We took and put in precautions in place for those employees that we had in our facilities to take care of our facilities that we couldn't send home. And then we allowed and adjusted for home work environment for those that we could. And so we are now back in the office. So we're working from home for a couple of months and remotely, and we all got acquainted with Zoom, and every conference call became a video conference. I'm not sure we'll ever have just telephone conference calls in the future. That may be something that sticks. I don't know. But we adjusted, and since then we've reopened. We've brought employees back, and it was really great to have that personal interaction again. I think we lose some of that collaboration when we're not here in person, and we work in the tourism industry is a very personal industry. It's a face-to-face business. It's gathering with your friends. It's gathering with your colleagues. And so we've been able to pull back into the office, I think, in a very comfortable manner. The mask is kind of the new in thing that's part of the wardrobe now. And so we're being able to implement that as well. But I think for the most part, everybody's pretty comfortable coming and going, and we've got fewer people here, and so we're able to spread out.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm doing all the things I have to do in my business where we go and what we do, but I'm not yet allowing the wardrobe piece to become permanent. So I'm still on the single use, let's not invest too much into these masks, but at the same time, it has been fun to see the personalities come through.
Sure.
Through the mask. So a lot of people I talk to, great leaders rise to the top and to the occasion and protect the people that are within their threshold. But it's challenging as well. I mean, I don't know, I've talked to anybody who says, yeah, this is just fun for me. I love it. Some people do kind of thrive on that. Adam I mentioned with car tie, he's one of those people that would choose the more difficult path than the easy path 9 times out of 10. But from a just sort of mental standpoint, how have you dealt with this and handled this? I know it's kind of a tougher question, but we've all had our struggles.
Yeah, so I've always been kind of a lifelong learner. And so I read a lot of industry pubs. I do a lot of industry podcasts. I want to hear about great innovative ideas that we can bring here and really make them our own. And so I've always done some of that. But now during this time period, I've kind of done that on steroids. I'm usually at home in the evenings with my laptop, and I'm reading even more, I'm listening to even more. But at some point it gets really draining, and there's only so much depressing material and depressing numbers you can look at. And so I try to balance the positive approach and find those really great stories of inspiration to hang on to, knowing that there's a lot of devastating stories. And so it's a balance for me. When I get to a breaking point, or even I've tried to incorporate more exercise into my routine. I live right on our river trail, and it's a tremendous asset. And so I've spent way more time on my bicycle or walking or jogging than I had previously done. So now that's kind of back into my routine, and I enjoy it. It's also nice to get a little fresh air, clear your head, just listen to music, get out of my world for a little while. And that's really been beneficial for me. I've stayed in contact with some friends in the industry. We have regular kind of happy hour Zoom meetings that can provide that instant interaction of we are all in this together. We can have some levity and some laughs and tears together, and that's really been good for the soul. So that's kind of how I'm trying to manage and plow through it.
I think the most common 3 things are sunshine, exercise, and alcohol. So it sounds like you're doing a healthy mix of all.
I've got them all checked.
Back to, for people who might not know, and we've talked a lot about it, so I think we've answered this question to an extent, but every sizable city has a convention and visitors bureau. Most people in the business community understand what that is, what that does, but for the layman, the person who doesn't understand, what is a convention and visitors bureau? Why do you exist?
Sure. So, and in some communities, they're called convention and visitors bureaus. In some communities, they're called destination marketing organizations, or DMOs. And basically, we exist to tell the community story and to try to get visitors to come into town, spend money, and then leave. And so, I mean, it's as simple as that. They come in, they spend money, they provide an infusion to our small businesses, they help generate and increase the tax dollar base, but then they leave because they're here for just a short term, and so they don't use all of the services that those tax dollars go toward. So typically a visitor wouldn't be using your roads and your trash and your police and fire services that our tax dollars support. And so they really help build up that tax base. That's how they create that economic impact. And then word of mouth, they go tell their friends if they've had a great time, and hopefully we continue the process of bringing in more visitors. But the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we work with a variety of partners to try to tell those inspiring stories that will be of interest to bring visitors here so that they can spend their money and stay for a short term. Of course, some of our efforts lead to long term. So they may come here for a meeting or a convention that we recruit to town. And when we recruit meetings and conventions to town, that's not just a small family coming, that's a major infusion of impact and dollars. If it's 1,000 people or a couple hundred people in for a week, that's a tremendous impact. And maybe they come and they see what we have to offer and say, wow, I came for a convention, but now I want to bring my family back. And so that's a repeat customer. Maybe it's they come and they learn about a business here and they say, I want to live in that community. And that's a long-term client. And so we really touch all of those kind of avenues. And for us here, we also want to make sure our residents know what our assets are. And so we communicate with our residents also to, again, lift up the awareness of all of those great businesses that we have in our backyard.
So obviously the main point is to bring people in and get people out, but I'll use Austin, Texas again as an example. Certain things create a culture and a long-term lasting effect that a city becomes known for, and then all of a sudden people want to move here. So it ultimately has a lot to do with the overall population and city growth, and further down the line to local economic development. Do you guys work with what's the next big thing that we want to build here in Little Rock? Are you all part of those conversations?
Sure, in a variety of ways. We work some with the Little Rock Regional Chamber. You know, economic development is kind of their wheelhouse for the long term, but we're really economic development on the short term in a lot of ways. And so when they're bringing in businesses to relocate here, they're a tourist, if you will, on the front end. When the business is trying to choose, am I going to be able to get people to relocate here? That's a tourism kind of angle. All of the amenities that we promote from a tourism standpoint are what generates and creates the quality of life for our residents. And so that's why they're really all intertwined. We try to help work with them to tell those great stories. We partner with them sometimes to bring in writers and third-party media to get a better story, if you will. So that way it's not us telling the story, it's a journalist telling their experience in a variety of different niche markets. We really do have a lot of assets here in Little Rock, and I think a lot of people that come here, maybe they've got a blank slate. They don't have a negative perception of Little Rock, but they've got a blank slate. And by and large, our research tells us when they come here, they're very pleasantly surprised at the amount of events and activities and culture that we do have to offer. And we, of course, work with the city of Little Rock in a variety of ways. We manage the public buildings that are actually owned by the city of Little Rock. We manage those assets. And then we're involved heavily in product development as well. So our organization is currently paying for the $70 million renovation of our Performing Arts Theater. And that's a huge piece of our culture. It's home to our symphony and our Broadway and a small conference center. And we utilized our tourism revenues to pay for that. We've also helped contribute to projects and assets like the bridge lighting in our downtown area, to our trail development, to hosting groups and festivals and events that really do speak to what culture we have here in Little Rock. And so we're a part of a lot of those. And then we own a few community events, whether that be Movies in the Park or Jazz in the Park or our annual holiday parade. We really have incubated those events and continue to manage them, as well as helping sponsor a lot of others.
Who are some of the other cities that you guys base comparative data off of, and from a cultural standpoint and a tourism standpoint, who are some of those other cities out there that you said Little Rock is, if we picked it up, put it somewhere else, where would we go?
Yeah, so it's a little different depending on what market segment you're looking at. So who we consider potential competitors on the leisure side, which is just general family vacation type, are a little different than our competitors on the meeting and convention side. So on the meeting and convention side, I'll start with those. We kind of monitor who are we up against on a regular, reoccurring basis. You know, when we're bidding for national and regional conventions, who do we come head to head with? Who are we in the short list with? Birmingham hits that list quite a bit. Tulsa and Oklahoma City hits that list quite a bit. We're seeing more Kansas City in that list quite a bit. Some Baton Rouge, to our neighbors to the south of us as well. But then if it's a national association, a lot of national associations kind of move across the country. So our competitors there are in totally different areas. It may be Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Omaha, Nebraska, and you don't really think of those two destinations as being competitors of ours, but they are on that national meeting side. On the leisure side, we consider some of our competitors those that have either similar assets and attractions that we do, or they're kind of within our drive market. And so most of our leisure visitors, the research shows, comes from kind of a 6-hour radius around us. That's kind of our primary bread and butter of where we're receiving our leisure vacationers. And so on that standpoint, we really get a lot closer in. So places like Memphis become a competitor because they're kind of within that drive distance. The Dallas-Fort Worth area and some of the suburbs of that area. We see some St. Louis and some Shreveport, even Nashville and Chattanooga area. So Birmingham hits that list a little bit again, so does Tulsa and Kansas City. And so all of those destinations have some similar product that we do, and they're also kind of within that same drive distance.
So if I'm in Oklahoma City trying to make my weekend plans or a week getaway, what makes me choose Little Rock over Kansas City?
Well, I think right now we can talk a little bit about our size, and it's an advantage, right? So we are convenient, we're easy to get to. We are really kind of a smaller destination, but that offers a lot of big destination amenities. And that really plays in our favor right now when people are really trying to avoid the crowds, avoid the big city. And we've got those amenities, but we really don't have that kind of congestion. And so we're talking about that. We also, again, play up a lot of our outdoor amenities, but we really can layer those in with a tremendous amount of culture and entertainment options as well. So I think we can play that message pretty well. One other big component of ours that is kind of top of mind right now as well, we've kind of got two pandemics going on at the same time, and one of them is very cultural, and it speaks a lot to our heritage here in Little Rock. And one of our biggest assets is our national park and Central High and our desegregation, and we were right in the middle of it in 1957, and I've been blessed to be on the team long enough that I've helped celebrate the 50th anniversary of Little Rock Central High and the opening of that National Park Museum, and also celebrate the 60th anniversary. But we also worked with 14 other states 2 years ago to launch the U.S. Civil Rights Trail, and we're continuing to build assets on that. There's over 100 sites featured on that trail, and so we have a tremendous amount of that cultural history that is really coming to life right now, and I think will benefit us to be able to be honest and talk about our history and our heritage and tell the story of where we started, where we've been, and we still have room to grow. No question about it. We've still got a lot to learn and a lot of changes still need to be made, but I think Little Rock is kind of going to be in the epicenter of that civil rights history and have been for years, and that will be an asset to us in the future.
I love that, and I feel like Little Rock has set a great example and been an inspiring view of how this is all transpired nationwide, and it's been really interesting to be a part of. And I'm really proud of Little Rock and the way things have been done. I feel like at a very mature level. And I think that points back to the heritage, the fact that this is a place that we can overcome things and we can do things.
And again, we all have room to grow and changes that are needed, but we really have seen some tremendous stories and change that's already happening at our local and state level. So it really is inspirational to see how those peaceful protests and the conversations have really risen to the top and created a cultural change.
Who are some of the people in your life that inspire you and influence you to help you grow and become a better leader?
So first and foremost, probably my mother. I call her my shero. I had someone ask me one time, Gretchen, you're pretty young to be a CEO, and I think you're doing really great work, and leadership just seems to come natural to you. Of course, I was a little taken aback and obviously humbled by that comment, and they said, it just seems to come natural to you, so where does that come from? And why did you think at this age you could take on that leadership role? And I said, leadership's all I've ever known. My mom was in a leadership position in a business, and someone also asked me, they said, you're the first female to ever have this position too. So not only was I the youngest, I was the first female, and sometimes being the only female at a board table is intimidating. And they asked, are you ever intimidated? And I said, no, I feel like I've earned my place there. And I also never really thought about the fact that I was the only female. Of course I noticed, but it never really created that intimidation factor because I watched my mom go through that. And I guess because she broke so many glass ceilings before me, I never really thought there was a barrier there for me. But I know a lot of young women don't have that. And so I'm very fortunate to have that and be able to kind of watch her in a management position and learn from her. And it helps that she's also a dear friend as well. And so we travel together. We have a lot of the same passions and interests. And she's still with me. So even better, I can call her when I'm needing some advice as well, and she gives it often. I've got a lot of mentors in this organization, and some are coworkers that encouraged me as a very young person to apply for the CEO job. And now I'm their boss. But that kind of encouragement just means the world to me, and they are absolutely my mentor, even if I am technically their boss. I've had some tremendous leadership on the Advertising and Promotion Commission that have been great mentors of mine as I have grown and stumbled at times. And then I've got one aunt that is my grandmother's sister. I lost my grandmother when I was 7, and I've heard tremendous stories about how wonderful of a person she was. I don't remember much because I was very young. But her youngest sister has always been a close confidant, if you will, and she's got an intriguing story, and I've always said someday I hope I can take the time to just write a book about her story. She's inspirational, she's brilliant, and just a wonderful person, and so I found a lot of inspiration through her as well.
I love that. All right, I want to move into just kind of quick hit questions.
Okay.
So what is the best or the latest book that you've read?
I go to Holy Souls Catholic Church, and each year they give us a book. And I guess that was probably the last book I read. And it was kind of over the Christmas, New Year's holidays before all of this started. So kind of an inspirational and on the faith-based side.
Is there a go-to publication you're into right now that's kind of feeding you all the information?
There's 2 or 3 in the industry that have provided tremendous research, and Destinations Analyst is one. Of course, the association that I'm on the board, Destinations International, kind of aggregates a lot of the best data, as well as U.S. Travel Association. So those are kind of my go-to places to be able to find resources that I need.
I know a lot of daily routines have changed over the last several months, but do you have something you have to do every single day?
Besides drink 2 cups of coffee to wake up in the morning. In this industry, and actually one thing that I love about this job, pre-COVID and during COVID, is I never live the same day twice. So every day really is totally different. Yes, there are things that I would like to be able to do on a daily basis. It doesn't always seem to work out that way, except maybe my 2 cups of coffee.
Best piece of advice you've ever given or received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received and given is never ask someone to do something you're not willing to do yourself.
I love that.
I learned that at an early age. I believe in it, and I give that advice often.
Yeah, I try to live by that as well. I think a lot of times nowadays we have access to information, we have access to so many things that we feel like if I'm going to ask somebody to do something, it better be something that I'm willing to take on because they can find a way to do it themselves. They don't have to do it my way. There's just,
Sure.
It's such a different world now than it was 20 years ago. And I think that a lot of people want to see that you're willing to jump in the trenches with them.
Absolutely.
Do you have any relatively new formed habits? Good or bad?
I think my team can probably answer that one better than I can. They can probably rattle off a lot of them. I don't know that I have any real new habits. I'm exercising a little more. I hope that remains a habit after COVID because it certainly makes me feel better.
Mine, embarrassingly, is I wake up and usually my computer's right by the bed and I just sit in bed for like 2 hours and work first thing in the morning. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
that was already a habit I had.
yeah,
I guess, so
I would at least get out of bed previously, but now I guess I don't have to be anywhere right away. So
Right.
You mentioned maybe one day writing a book about your aunt. But if you could write a book, what would you title it?
Well, actually, I have written a book, co-authored a book. It's right up my alley, though. It was the 100 Things to Do Before You Die in Little Rock, and co-authored the second edition of that with a friend of mine. That one was pretty easy to write. I have lots more than 100 things to talk about with our city and the city I love, but the book I really want to write is about my aunt, and I would have to come up with a creative title for her. I'll give you cliff notes. So she was in the convent as a nun at one time. Late in life, she married a gentleman. It was her second marriage, his first marriage, and they were in their 70s, and he had been a priest at one time. So the former nun marries the former priest. Also in her 60s, she adopted 2 young children from 2 different Russian orphanages, and tremendous success stories. She got her PhD in her 50s or 60s in counseling, and I'm convinced she was the only individual on the planet that could have taken those 2 children that came from horrific backgrounds, and she adopted them when they were 10 and 11, and they are both young adults, thriving, live in California. She just has an amazing story. So I would have to get with some of my creative friends to help come up with a perfect title for that story.
That's fun. All right, concerts aren't really a thing now, but who's your top musician, artist? When things open up, what concert are you going to go to?
Oh, man. I have a very eclectic mix on my Pandora stations, and so everything from country to hip hop. I don't do a lot of rap, but alternative and even a little bit of jazz mixed in. So, one that I was really looking forward to that was booked at Robinson was Ben Rector. He may not be that well known in a lot of circles, but I really like a lot of his music. It's got an upbeat tempo to it. On the countryside, I'm a big Rascal Flatts and even a Pat Green fan, so I've seen him in concert many times. He puts on a good show. And then I'm a big U2 fan, so it kind of runs the gamut for me on the music spectrum.
I love that. I won't go down my music path, but also a big Pat Green fan. He was becoming a huge sort of Texas country star. I grew up in Texas and loved him when I was in high school and went to several concerts back in the day before he got big deals in Nashville and all that. But all right, when restaurants started opening up, what was the first one you went to? Favorite food, favorite place to eat?
Oh man, that's going to get me in trouble. You know that, right? Like,
you don't have to say a place. We'll go with a style.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of all of our local eateries. So sometimes the local produce drives my decision. So during strawberry season, I've got to hit Trios for their strawberry shortcake. During Arkansas tomato season, there's about 4 different places that I go for like the best BLT sandwich. And so I really kind of gravitate more toward that Southern comfort food, but maybe a little bit more on the healthy side.
I love that. Well, Gretchen, thanks so much. This has been a fun conversation.
Thanks.
I appreciate all you're doing, and thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
If you liked this episode of Titans of Industry, head to contenttitan.co/podcast for more episodes or subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks for listening.